Welcome to the Marketing AI SparkCast, where AI meets modern marketing. Hosted by Aby Varma, a global leader in marketing, AI, and innovation, each episode brings you real conversations with leaders putting AI to work in strategy and execution. This episode is brought to you by Spark Novus and the Marketing AI Pulse community. Here's your host, Aby Varma.
Hello, everybody. So AI is everywhere right now. Like you can run, but you can't hide. But most teams are still figuring out how to use it in a way that really actually makes sense. We have a very exciting guest today, Nicola Smith, who is helping one of the biggest enterprises out there to turn AI from just a cool idea into something real and strategic. She's a senior AI programs advisor at Southwest Airlines, and she is here to share why every company needs an AI strategist and why marketing leaders might be the ones best equipped to play that role. So, Nicola, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
No, it's our pleasure. So why don't we just dive in and tell us a little bit about your current role and, more interestingly, your journey that has led you to it?
Yeah, so my current role is Senior AI Programs Advisor. And I'm doing a number of different things within the team. So we actually have a standalone AI team that we're now part of the technology team. My role is primarily focused on helping to develop an overarching AI strategy for Southwest, and then also helping to build AI product strategy capabilities within our team. And then the other part of my job is really thinking about AI literacy and fluency. How do we tell stories around the work that we're doing with AI so that we can help users, employees, and folks across the business really understand the value of this new technology and what it could be doing for them and their teams. My journey and career path has been much more of a winding road than a straight line. So I have largely played in the intersection of creativity and emerging technology and consumer behavior. Actually started my career very early days doing production design and PA work on films. So in that storytelling, creative world. And then I worked in radio for a while and got familiar with Arbitron reporting back in the day, and that led me into the marketing world, and was lucky enough to work at a couple of agencies here in Atlanta where I had the opportunity to build teams focused on emerging trends, primarily looking at emerging trends in technology, consumer behavior, and media platforms. And then within those teams, was often charged with actually building capabilities around some of those emerging spaces. So things like building social media teams before we even had social media as a term. We had Facebook, and then we had Twitter, and we had a cascade of new platforms, but really building out an organic social media practice and a paid social media practice. My team also then built out our mobile app and mobile web practice. And as each of these capabilities became more mature, we would push them out of our team and into the broader agency. And so being able to build new capabilities around emerging spaces has become my specialty, and saw where AI was heading a number of years ago, started to get my hands dirty, really playing with these tools myself. I'm not a technologist, I'm not a developer, so I'm not building any of these tools, but that led me to Southwest, and really was drawn there because their philosophical approach to the space very much aligns with my view and my approach and what I think is really important in this new world that we're creating.
Amazing. That's a fantastic journey, and congratulations to all that you've accomplished. You mentioned AI literacy. What is your take on how organizations should approach it, and how individuals can leverage that in organizations where it is not being handled at an organizational level?
Yeah, so I think it's actually vital. To me, it's one of the big missing pieces when we look at examples of AI tooling and product rollouts internally across not just in Southwest, but in other brands, the lack of literacy and a lack of a true adoption strategy has ended up with, right now, I think there was a recent study that found that only about a quarter of AI initiatives are delivering the expected ROI. And a large part of that is because they're not seeing the actual adoption that is expected. I think there's a number of different ways to approach literacy in this space. There are lots of partners out there that might be able to help you develop an AI literacy program. To me, a big piece of it is, how do we think about really educating people that are really across the spectrum as far as their exposure and knowledge of AI? So one of the big things that we've found so far within our organization is that we have a significant number of employees who, at least will say on a survey, that they have not used AI in any capacity for their job. We've got other folks who are sharing use cases with us that we could never have imagined. And when you think about AI literacy, it's a really interesting space because you have to educate and build literacy across that spectrum of folks that are really advanced and those who have never touched it. And so it's a pretty complex space as we think about literacy and how we actually educate and train people on the usage of these tools. One other thing I will say, though, that's very interesting and that I only recently found out about is, if you are doing business in the EU, they are actually starting to roll out AI literacy requirements, regulatory requirements for companies doing business within the Eurozone. I think we're entering into a very interesting world where literacy isn't just a nice to have or a benefit that will drive adoption, but it's actually becoming a regulatory requirement depending on where you do business and how you do business. So that to me is a fascinating shift that we've seen within the past couple of months.
Yeah, I think all the research like Salesforce or the Marketing AI Institute, especially around marketers, routinely highlight that over 60% of the marketers feel that the lack of literacy and education is the number one reason why they're apprehensive about adoption. So that sort of snaps right into some of your comments and observations. So you've obviously come from a rich background. Marketing has always been, sounds like, part of your heritage, quote unquote, in terms of what you've done. Clearly, you are playing a larger role at Southwest just beyond marketing, but you are also working with the marketing team, sounds like, at the same time. So maybe tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the marketing team is currently one of my clients, essentially. We are an internal service team, is the way to think about the AI team. We have some strategy capabilities that I am leading, and then we're largely a delivery team. So majority of our team is made up of data scientists and AI devs. I have been leading an initiative with our marketing team where they are my client right now. And we have been going through the process of looking at their entire go-to-market campaign process and really highlighting opportunities within that process where we think AI could be a solution for the pain points that team is feeling. So it's been very interesting to not be in a day-to-day marketing role, but to be able to bring that knowledge to bear as we start to think about where are the opportunities for AI, what strategically makes the most sense, how do we think about what we might build in this space versus what we're going to buy that's already off the shelf. So it's been an interesting journey to be leading that project, but not necessarily be in the day-to-day marketing churn.
Yeah, for sure. In general, the world of AI is appending marketing in kind of a big way, more than any other function, frankly, especially around generative AI. So for marketing leaders and CMOs, what, in your opinion, is truly the value that they should think about that AI can bring to the marketing function?
Yeah, so one of the things that I'm seeing in the broader market is a real reliance on efficiency as the primary success metric for any type of AI solution. So how much time is it saving your team? I think marketing is one of those interesting places where building efficiency and having more throughput, being able to produce more advertising campaigns, more content, may impact your ROI positively, but it's not a guarantee. And I think that's one of the reasons I'm interested in the marketing space, is because to me, it's actually the easiest place for those of us who are AI practitioners to be able to prove a connection, not just to an efficiency metric, but directly to ROI. And if we can start to tie AI initiatives to ROI, to me, that really changes the game. But a lot of what I'm seeing is a reliance on that efficiency metric. Can we get work done faster? Can we get more work done? The answer to both of those questions is absolutely. But I think that's where it becomes an interesting question for marketers of, how do we ensure that if we're producing more content, if we're doing more campaigns, that they're actually high quality, that they're better aligned with the messages our customers want and need to hear, that they're actually going to drive conversion. And I'm much more interested in how do we use AI to create better campaigns than I am interested in how do we use AI to create more campaigns. But that's my personal interest. And if you're a volume-based business where you know churning out more ads is going to drive a certain percentage of higher conversions, that might be all you need, is an efficiency play. But I have been thinking much more about AI as a creative collaborator and a strategic collaborator, as opposed to just an automation tool.
That makes sense. We work with a lot of CMOs and marketing leaders, and very often what you said made me think about this, that when we engage with them, usually my first question is, hey, what's your current experience with AI? And a lot of them say that they're quote unquote doing AI. They're already doing AI. And that's very much focused on tool adoption and activity, and often lacks the strategic point of view, which is what you were talking about earlier. So for marketing leaders and CMOs, how can they avoid falling into that trap where they're quote unquote doing AI in terms of a lot of activity, but not really looking at it as a strategic initiative? What would your advice and recommendation be to them to avoid that, with those pitfalls?
Yeah, so I don't think it's enough to say we're doing AI or to just license some of these tools and hand them to your team. The places where we're seeing the most success are when we actually overhaul the entire process and think about AI as a step in that process. We're ensuring that humans are in the loop and involved. We're really thinking strategically about the role of humans and the role of AI and what each of those different types of intelligence are really good at. What are their strengths? And there are a lot of things that humans are great at that AI is terrible at. And there are a lot of things that AI is exponentially better than humans at doing. But I think a lot of it is really breaking down your process, understanding what is your current workflow for getting this task done or getting this a campaign out the door, and then really looking and scrutinizing where does it make sense for us to insert AI, or for AI to take over a certain piece of that workflow or a task within that workflow. And I think when you start to break it down that way and think about it as, which tasks are we going to have AI do for us within a workflow? It makes it a lot simpler to define the role of AI. It also will allow you to find the right type of AI, and that may be an off-the-shelf product, but it may also be picking which model is best for that specific task or workflow, and then really making it a discrete part of your process and incorporating it in, not just throwing it over the fence and saying, oh, figure out how to use this. So what's interesting, I think, is that organizations are viewing this as a technology problem. This isn't a technology problem. This is a strategy problem, and this is a process problem that we actually are needing to solve. And I don't know that most organizations are really approaching it from that standpoint or thinking about who needs to be involved in that, given the scope of what truly implementing an AI solution means. And I think that's probably the biggest misstep that I'm seeing, is not thinking about change management, not scrutinizing your existing process. Your process should not stay the same if you are inserting AI into that process. By definition, something in your process should be changing.
Yep. So I see that. Do you think that in terms of starting with tool adoption without strategy and that sort of thing, like you said, doing AI, is that an evolutionary process for most organizations? Because I think generally organizations are averse to mass upheavals and transformations unless it's super intentional and is a big change. And most organizations don't have the appetite for that. So most times what we see with marketing organizations is they'll start using tools based on the tools and the learnings, then they go start tooling with the process and the people. In your opinion, is one process better than the other? Taking a broader view and architecting the whole workflow and then seeing where AI plays a part, or experimenting and evolving as you go along? Is one methodology better than the other?
I think it probably depends a little bit on your organization, how you're structured, how large you are. I think there is a world in which you can experiment at that small level. But even if you're experimenting at a small level, you should, in my mind, be thinking about what task are we expecting AI to perform for us within this narrow experiment. So I would still take the same approach to how would you uncover opportunity, even if what you're looking at is a very narrow piece of your workflow or an ad hoc process that you don't do every day, but becomes a really good place for you to experiment with whether or not AI fits and how it fits and what type of skills you might need to train the team up on in order to be able to use that tool. But I do think that the companies that are going to be the most successful are those who, at this time right now, when AI is in its infancy, take a step back and start to really question how things have always been done. And I would almost say that should be the lens through which you're viewing everything. Is things are changing every day in this industry. There are new tools. There's probably 5 new tools that I don't even know about that launched this morning. Trying to keep up is a fool's errand in my mind. It's impossible. And I also don't even know that it's that relevant, right? To try and keep up with every newest model and the latest. Maybe if you're on the technology side and you're building AI tools, you should probably keep up with all the model changes. For marketers, I think the bigger question that we should be asking is, where are there pain points within our existing processes? And let's see if AI could solve those pain points. And if we could reimagine the way that we work with these new tools at our disposal and come up with completely new ways of doing and creating and ideating and campaign planning and coming up with customer journeys. And I feel like marketing is prime for this because it is a creative industry. We are used to thinking outside of the box, right? Depending on the type of brands you work with, that might be your job, is we want to do stuff that has never been done before. So I think out of the various types of teams I see within large enterprises, I think marketing is actually primed to think most creatively about the application of these tools. We just can't get sucked into the efficiency only mindset, because I think that will stifle our creativity as an industry with what's possible here.
Yep, love that. I always believe and say this, that we'll be doing things differently, but we will also be doing different things. So both need to be working hand in hand. So something that you said caught my eye about uncovering AI opportunities. How can marketing organizations approach uncovering opportunities? The average sort of workshop with CMOs and marketing leaders that we end up hosting results in 50 to 100 opportunities that the quote unquote use cases that people come up with. But what is your advice on a process or a methodology to really uncover those opportunities?
Yeah, so one of the things, so we use design thinking as a problem-solving framework. Many people are probably familiar with it. You can really use it as a framework for solving any types of problems. But part of the reason that we use it as our discovery framework, especially, is because it is very focused on understanding your end user and building empathy around that user and truly understanding their pain points. The reason that's important is because too often in the technology world, you will see solutions being built that don't actually solve a need or don't address a pain point. And then we struggle with adoption and we wonder why we're not seeing traction. And the reality is that giving someone another dashboard or a tool that does X, Y, and Z, if it's not really addressing their need, it probably shouldn't have been built, right? Like we need to have tangible needs to build against. So instead of starting with what are the opportunities, we actually start with what are the pain points? And then we don't assume that AI is the solution. Sometimes the solution is a process overhaul. Sometimes the solution is a different type of technology. But we start there. What are the pain points? And then from those pain points, we dive deeper. And one of the things that we've been looking for, I think there are certain signals that you can look for that are almost just like little breadcrumbs letting you know, hey, maybe look over here. Let's do some more exploration. Let's dig into how much value could really be provided. So the things that we look for that let us know that there might be an opportunity to really leverage AI is anywhere where the team is doing a bunch of repetitive actions or repetitive tasks over and over again. We look for places where we have existing data or existing historic assets. So in marketing, do we have campaign collateral that we could ingest into the system? Do we have old campaign briefs? Do we have reporting and metrics from our campaigns? What do we have that can actually be ingested into a solution? We look at places where the team is already leveraging any type of templatization for either inputs or outputs. So again, do we have a campaign brief template? Do we have a template for our reporting coming out of a campaign? And then we also look for places where there seems to be a high rate of human error, because that tells us that there's probably some kind of a manual process happening that we might be able to address with some sort of an automation or AI solution. So those are really the signals that tell us, here's a place to continue exploring, to dig a little deeper, to see what might really be a solution to the challenges that we're seeing.
Yeah, I think one of the things you said resonated with me, because very often evaluation of the process end to end sheds light on the fact that people are looking at AI for solutions when there isn't really a need. AI doesn't have a role to play in it. It could be easily solved with things that you already have and automation and that sort of thing. So how should teams be careful about that and spot that early, where there's obviously AI, but not force AI into everything where it may not be needed? Is there any sort of telltale signs of that which marketing leaders should be aware of and careful about?
Yeah, in general, I would ask the question, why AI? What value is AI bringing to this that we're not getting, for example, through an analytics dashboard? But I will actually challenge you there slightly. Is one of the things that we've been talking about is, what if you didn't need a dashboard? What if you had a chat interface and you could just ask it questions, right? And it could produce a report for you, or it could just give you the answer based out of the data. So how many people converted from the Atlanta metro region on our last campaign? And it could just give you the information. And I think that's, again, is like this idea of thinking differently. Like if we're going to use AI, We can obviously use it when we're talking about analytics for predictive modeling and some scenario planning. There's a lot of interesting things on the predictive side that you can do. But I would almost say, what would it look like to have an analytics platform or solution that was driven by generative AI and that maybe didn't require a dashboard? Is that even valuable? Would our teams want that? But that's something that we've been exploring, is just literally how could we flip some of these things completely on their head and maybe assume maybe they don't even need a visualization, right? Maybe they just need a data point. Maybe they just need a number. So there's some interesting things that we're starting to explore in this space as well.
No, absolutely. I think you're 100% right. That is something, coincidentally, that was our recommendation, because we work with technologies where you can, quote unquote, talk to your data. The word vibe coding is super popular. We're working with a tool that does vibe analytics, where marketers are not interested in the sausage making of the data and the inner joins of these data tables. They really want insights where you can really talk about information and extract that information. Let's pivot a little bit and talk about the future of work. Like, I think as marketers, that is going to change quite dramatically. And what caused a little bit of a recent controversy was when Dario Amodei, the CEO of Anthropic, recently claimed that 50% of entry-level jobs may be gone in the next few years. How do you feel about that, the future of work and the impact of AI into that, especially in the context of marketing?
I think it is possible that his prediction is accurate, but with some context and nuance. I think maybe 50% of today's entry-level positions will be gone. But I think we're about to see a slew of new roles that haven't existed before, that we haven't defined yet, we don't have titles for, maybe we don't even know exactly what those jobs are yet. But in the next 3 to 5 years, I think we're going to see completely new functional roles that we have never had before. I also think that one of the things that was sparked from that comment was there were a number of companies who came out and said, we're actually strategically going in the opposite direction. We see that industry, business, enterprise, small brand, big brand, doesn't matter. We're moving into an AI world. We are going to over-index on hiring entry level because we want AI natives. So for our dev teams, we want people who've grown up with AI coding assistants. For marketing teams, I think you're going to see the same. I think you're going to start to see AI capabilities included in job requirements. And it's going to be younger employees or those of us who are first adopters who are going to tangibly have those skills to bring to the table. And is it going to change the dynamic of work or the makeup of teams? 100%. Do we know exactly what that's going to look like yet? Absolutely not. But I think that the opportunity there, especially for younger employees, is turn yourself into an AI native. Be one of those people who could come in and say, oh, I know how to use Midjourney. I know how to use Sora, right? Like, I know how to use Salesforce's latest AI-powered solution. Go and learn those tools on your own. Put those on your resume, because if agencies aren't thinking that way now, they will be in the next 6 months. The other piece is also think strategically about how you can take your skills and those skills that are inherent to marketing and think about where else those could be valuable and be applied. So one of the interesting things that I've started to talk about, and I've actually seen some other folks talking about the same thing, is the idea that, like, prompt engineering at its core is communication. It's clear, it's being able to communicate clearly. And to me, it's fascinating that when it gets pulled into the technology space, they give it a fancy name. They make it seem like you have to have technical knowledge to write a prompt. It's engineering. It's not just writing. It's not communicating. It's engineering. It is really just straight up communication. If you are good at communicating, you can write great prompts. That is what it comes down to. And if you're a marketer, you're ahead of most because that is your job, is to communicate clearly and concisely, right? So in my mind, there is a slew of opportunities for people with marketing backgrounds because as use of these tools becomes commonplace across the business and across different business functions, you know what a lot of devs are not great at? Communicating. You know, there are certain functions within your org that are really not primed to be the ideal user, at least for LLM-based solutions. So it's an interesting world in which I almost feel like technology has co-opted the space and has made it seem like you have to have tech skills to be an AI. And I actually think to be the best user of AI, you actually have to have communication skills. That is the core skill. And marketers are primed to take advantage of that.
Yep, love it. To all the developers listening, you can contact Nicola on LinkedIn. I'm just totally kidding. So I love that. Like you said, marketers are primed for this. So I believe, especially given your journey, is a perfect example of that, where every enterprise needs an AI strategist. Sounds like that's the role, regardless of the official job title. Sounds like that's the role you're playing within your enterprise. And it sounds like marketers may be a really good fit for that role, right? Like enterprise, what are your thoughts on that? Does every enterprise firstly need an AI strategist? And would CMOs have almost an edge in terms of playing that role, or somebody with a marketing background occupying that role?
Yeah, this actually, I think, comes back to something I have been saying for probably 15 years, is that the CMO should really be the CMTO. Marketing and technology are inextricably linked. That's not to say all marketing is about technology, right? Like I am a very big proponent of brand and having a strong brand. I think it is not that marketers necessarily should own this space. In fact, I don't think that any one department should own AI. It is and will continue to expand how ubiquitous it is, right? There's a world coming very quickly where everything has AI, and everything, every tool, every technology, every platform, every vendor solution has an AI component. So I think it's more that I think marketing should be at the table as part of guiding that strategic vision. But technology plays a role here too, because as much as there has to be an overarching strategy that helps to guide where are we focusing AI, where is the most value for our organization, how do we have a human-centric approach, you also need a tech strategy for your AI tech stack, right? So it's not just one or the other. And then I would even say HR has a role. Think about workforce development, think about hiring. I've been speaking to HR and telling them every single job description will probably have to change in the next 3 to 5 years to incorporate AI in some capacity, right? Or we'll need to account for the fact that AI is now doing these 3 tasks within this role. It's looking at finance and legal, like legal and governance play a huge role in defining our AI strategy. So it's interesting because AI almost has started, it feels in some ways similar to kind of the early days of social media or even the early days of mobile, where, you know, I remember working at an agency and my entire team was running social media and having our legal department come in and say, you are not allowed to be on any social media platforms at work. And me being like, that's literally our job. So maybe you need to change your legal requirements. Like, we're being paid to do that for your clients. And it feels similar where like, we've got to have all of these different stakeholders in the room, because we're not just implementing, no offense to Salesforce, but we're not just implementing like a CRM system. We are thinking about the application of a technology across almost every single function of the business that drastically impacts how we work And that isn't run by one department or owned by one piece of the business. And there's an interesting study by McKinsey that showcased that really the companies that are most successful with implementing AI solutions have not just executive support, but explicitly the CEO is directly involved in helping to define the strategy and drive AI initiatives. And I thought that was a very interesting kind of way of thinking about this, is that you really have to have true buy-in from the top to implement this stuff in the right way.
Yep, 100%. And so I think this has been a fascinating conversation. And the last question for you, imagine I'm a CEO and you're the CMO and I come to you and say, hey, Nicola, go figure out AI for marketing. How would you approach it? And this is specifically for our CMO and marketing leadership listeners on useful tips on how they can approach it. What would your advice be on how would you tackle it?
Yeah, I would start with, and it may be both of these in parallel. I would look for some quick win, easy use cases where there's little disruption and lots of value to be able to experiment with and implement some of these tools. And you might even start with looking at your existing tool stack and saying, what AI capabilities are we already licensing? And let's experiment with how we use those first. At the same time, I would be parallel tracking an overall assessment of your marketing processes end to end, and starting to uncover at a minimum, what are the pain points? What are the points of friction within our current process? And then starting to ask the question, could AI help us here? Not assuming it will, but could it? And to me, I think for a lot of us that are practitioners and are being charged with going and implementing, I think that's the best recipe for success, is quick wins to appease leadership so that they feel that there's traction and that they're more willing to invest. And then a longer term strategy and view as to how do we really think about how to work differently with these tools at our disposal, as opposed to just trying to plug them into what we do today. So that would be my advice, is you're going to have to probably do both if you want to be able to really be successful and get leadership at a level that they're willing to invest.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This has just been a fascinating conversation, Nicola. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Wonderful to chat with you today.
Fabulous. And to our listeners, if you want to see Nicola in person, she will be at the Marketing AI Pulse event, which is happening on July 24th at the Atlanta Tech Park here in Atlanta. For more information, you can go to marketingaipulse.com and learn about that. And then overall, if you're in marketing and you're trying to make sense of where AI fits in, you're not alone, right? But as Nicola reminded us, this is your chance to lead and not just follow. Tell us what you're trying to do, where you're stuck, what you're excited about. We'd love to hear from you. Follow Nicola and me on LinkedIn. And if this conversation sparked something for you, hit the follow button, share this with a colleague who needs to hear it too. So hope you guys enjoyed this and have a great day.